So the vision at three scale was developed at three scales. It was about empowerment of the individual, engagement with their communities, the notion that they were being regionally educated, but also building bridges, regional bridges at least, hopefully global at best.
But do you see that there is a relation between, or how do you envision this happening, by small interventions through these ecotonic things, as much as following the idea of the microlabs,
Yes.
doing small change, or at the same time a global strategy of you actually need to change the world to be able to produce ecotonics?
So at the KSA, the idea was to create these small labs. And we did a trial 1 year in terms of having 5 different people. And with the understanding that it's not just the labs you probably have to build for the system of action, but it's also the corridors, the things that connect the two, which could be anything from a space like a great cafe to a small institution, to any number of things. And first of all, I think ecotones by nature are actually much more resilient than the things on the two sides of it. Because the species that have adapted there have adapted to tremendous amounts of differential and also tremendous amounts of disturbance. And so often the smallest things that appear fragile may be fragile, but they're very resilient. But the other thing that's beautiful about them and about any ecosystem is that what makes a system like this resilient is when there's redundancies in it. So the notion of optimizing is actually totally counter to, which is what all education, everything anybody designs, anything anybody does is always about that. But what happens is you lose the resilience, because if one species dies out, something has to come in and take its place so that you have that kind of resilience. So, and I do believe that both sides are still needed. It's just that, like in the Inside Out University model, the idea is that the ecotone becomes very big and the other ones still remain. Because one thing that's being talked about a lot in terms of teaching is the notion that people have different dispositions. And so you can't, there are people who are just disposed to sit and read books and they get their information that way, and that's what drives their curiosity. But there are other people that you can't put them in a classroom and are really disposed to working at this. So the notion here in any ecosystem is that you need all of those things, and how do you begin to honor all of those? But it is meant to be small. The issue with the conversation is I'm hoping that, so I'm working with the Kennedy Institute of Bioethics next year, and I'm hoping that we really are going to be kind of doing one of these as a small model. Because the things that are going to create change are going to be new models. It's not going to be the President of the United States, creating X amount of dollars to get this one thing that everybody, to get Google education in the system. It's going to be models that actually show tremendous success.
So that gives a huge amount of questions in which mainly the track record of a university as Georgetown and many other universities with a track record as that may be sufficient for that creating of that ecotone. So here comes my question. What would you think would be the paces to start something like that in an ecotone where you don't have a track record of such a university as that, where you don't have a design school or architecture school at all? Even more, if you don't have that, is there an opportunity of creating actually a broad new career of architecture or design in more general basis of discussion? I don't know if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I do, and I think actually it's a great question, because actually my next own move is to begin to build something from scratch, right? I think, well, first of all, the fact that it gets large in here suggests that you're still doing a lot within accreditation. You're still really, not solving, but you're creating a situation where there are people actually better than before. But you have this as well. So what this is about is trying to create a learning environment in which the new species is even more valuable within the accredited, but also is extremely elastic in terms of, and in my field, we learn better. I mean, we retain information better by doing it in an experimental way. So that's the way it begins needs to work. If I was starting something from scratch without reputation that was wanting to do this, I would probably be very smart about who I got to be part of it. I would be very, very smart about the network that was part of it. And I would actually use the kind of network to begin to provide the embryonic credibility. And then later on, it wouldn't be so much about credibility, it would just be it's the knowledge community.
And I'm wondering, is there anything that we are throwing away in order to keep education 5 years, or is this model or any model that we're thinking requiring 15 years of education to get to be a designer in our case?
Well, first of all, the hard thing about this model is it looks like a pathway, when really the point is not a pathway, it's a concept of places to be. So for instance, I may be only there, right? I may say that this is right where my school is happiest to sit right now, right? There might be other people out here as well. So this is not meant to represent a pathway, it's meant to represent the boundary of how different it is from one side to the other. And these also are not meant to represent pathways, they're really meant to represent connective tissue of some sort, which could be mechanisms of that. But I would also suggest that...
But this is regardless, I mean,
But-
maybe
but
the
to
diagram
answer-
is not that, but the trajectory of a student in a traditional discipline, because of accreditation, because there is a outside enforced kind of list of things you need to accomplish, there is a time that you need to accomplish them in, and you're done, kind of.
See, I would actually suggest that education becomes exceedingly more efficient when you actually create the ecotone. For instance, for instance, within my landscape architecture discipline, the amount of stuff that they have to know is inordinate. If you teach it the same way, which is every year you can only get 10% of what you need to teach in terms of landscape technology in, it's one thing. If on the other hand, you actually create granular packets of information that are built as even components by outside experts, it means, and all you say in that class is that a student has to complete X amount, but students who want to complete more, or I'm doing a studio, it might even be an architectural studio, and I can go to that packet to begin to use it. When you use knowledge, it becomes much more efficient. So I actually would contend that it could become much more efficient in terms of how one does it. What is very beautiful about the fourth project is that they actually answer your other question, which is that in it, you move through the system maintaining always a portfolio, and you move through different projects and you can change trajectories. But their whole point is you might do 2 years and then leave the system for 3 years in diplomacy, go work for Hillary Clinton, and then come back into the system and do more, and your portfolio aggregates all of that. There might be a point at which between what you do in the class and what you do outside the class, and there's a whole new assessment systems being designed, the badges, right? That you, at a certain point, you are accreditable in a certain sense. It's a beautiful idea. Then there are the notion that people never leave the system, and they become faculty, and then they become deans, and then they become whatever. So it's very radical in that sense, because I do believe that's a question to be